Okay, hi everyone. I'm Janet Anderson. I call to order the Town of Lewisboro Planning Board meeting for Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. So the exit is the way you came in. To my the exits to my left are for emergencies only. We will post an audio recording of this meeting to the town website, and materials considered at this meeting are available in the agenda packet that were posted for this meeting. Kirsten Conrad, our planning board administrator, has confirmed that the meeting has been duly noticed and legal requirements fulfilled. Joining me tonight from the town of Lewisboro are members of the planning board, Paul Fusco, John Guzmano, Charlene Indelicato, and Bruce Thompson. We have a quorum, and thus we can conduct the business of the board and vote on any matters that come before us. Also, our counsel, Judd Siebert, is here, planning board administrator, Kirsten Conrad. So this is a special meeting to discuss some of the zoning changes recommended as a result of the comprehensive plan process. So the comprehensive plan document has been recommended to the town board by the comprehensive plan steering committee. And on March 25th, the town board did have a work session to discuss the proposed zoning changes. At that time, they also discussed the schedule. And it looks like the schedule will be much more extended than I originally thought. So when we set up this special meeting, and maybe go over it a little bit more, but let me just, so when we set it up, I was under the impression that there was going to be a public hearing in May on both the comp plan and this. Now it looks like it's going to be sequential, and the comp plan will go first. So it will have its own seeker, public hearings and adoption, and then there'll be a separate seeker, public hearing, referrals and adoptions. Go ahead.
Two things. One, the decision was made, and I agree with it, that for purposes of sequence, because the zoning code is to be premised or founded upon the comp plan, we should get the comp plan. Rather than do it in tandem, let's confirm the comp plan first and then proceed to the zoning amendments. So it's going to entail an additional round of public hearing process before the town board, but from a review and just from a formalization process, we feel it's probably the best way to do it, just to avoid any issue that we didn't take any shortcuts in terms of the approval process. So at the Monday meeting, the town board is likely to take the comp plan, set a public hearing for the comp plan at the end of April on the draft plan, and then possibly a second public hearing just to really be belt and suspenders approach with regard to New York town law requirements. We'll adopt the comp plan, and then we'll turn to the zoning amendments. Yeah.
Are we doing it immediately after? Because my understanding was that we were doing everything in tandem in order, because they're minor changes. There's nothing really big in it.
Yeah, but it's going to go 1-2. It'll happen. It'll happen sequentially, but there's not going to be a.
But there's no requirement that it goes.
I think our view is to do this most conservatively, and looking at the town law and looking at the fact that, particularly with the zoning amendments, that zoning amendments are to be, it makes a little more sound sense just to get the comp plan amended in place and then proceed with the zoning amendments.
I understand, Judge, but when it's minor changes, and we only have minor changes, in fact, we didn't put in some changes because they were going to be done in tandem.
Right.
Now we have a whole different world here. It's sort of like we're going to do the comp plan, maybe we're going to do the zoning amendments, or we're going to do the zoning amendments, and then any other zoning, because it's going to take like at least 6 months more.
I don't think it's going to take 6 months.
No?
Yeah, I think we can get this wrapped up by the fall. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the point of all that was that when I thought originally, and when we all set this up, I think we were kind of, okay, there's a May public hearing and we've got to be ready.
Yeah.
The net of this is that I don't think we're going to, at the end of tonight, it hasn't been referred to us, we're not going to be worried about writing a letter, we're going to have a chance to discuss some things. So I think, I think it's important to kind of look at a lot of the code that's been presented to us and really kind of make sure we understand it and are ready to give our opinion to the town board, because I do have some concerns with some of the things that are in here. So I think we have, I mean, if I've got it right, kind of, we probably have like 10 weeks, I don't know, a couple of months anyway, to kind of do this. So I think it's good to get it sort of kicked off at this special meeting, but maybe as we keep going forward, we're going to be able to talk about it a little bit at each of our meetings
Yeah,
and see what
I think
happens.
we can do this, just at a little more of a kind of bite size, so we can look up,
That's all
deal with particular things with a little more focus. Obviously, we'll record what we do, and then, and then move on to the next
Issue
set
of, yeah.
amendments.
Okay, so, and I think what Charlene said is right. If you look at the overall comprehensive plan, I don't think there's big changes in the direction of comprehensive plan. And there's not really big recommendations, like there's not, wholesale changing of zoning areas or anything like that. However, I think there are some things that are in the code that we should, or in the proposed code, that are worthwhile discussing. So I don't know whether any of you want to start off with something. You want to hear me talk for a little bit? What's the best way to go here?
I've read through, as much as I could read through as many times, and I have to say that I found it difficult because you're reading what the proposed change is, and then you're trying to remember what it was.
You
to
see the
compare it
strikeouts,
to,
yeah.
yes, or read through the strikeouts. But, yeah, there were a lot of little changes that were kind of raised questions, and they may not have been anything. I thought we were going to have somebody here, actually.
Yeah, no, so Valerie asked, because of this long time, she asked to, and I think because the town board actually, I'm not really clear, I listened to that meeting, but the town board might have asked for some changes.
There are some potential
Additional.
tweaks to be worked out, yes.
So she felt that she didn't want to come today. But we do have Judd, who knows everything, and both
Well,
Charlene and I have been through a lot of this. Well, no, you do. And if not, you can fake it, and we'll. But, I wanted to talk, I think overall there's some interesting shifts. Some of the special permit things that used to go to the zoning board are coming to us. I'm not really sure. I mean, one of the things we might want to end up is having some discussion with the zoning board about how it's things like contractor equipment in yards, which seem to me to be kind of a almost rote approval. And, I'm not really anxious to take over things that are road approvals, but I want to find out a little bit about what they do.
Yeah, well, I read that and I looked at that saying, well, that's pretty much black and white via the code. So if you're going to ask for, can I do this, that's zoning board, that's not the planning board.
Yeah, I think the thought process on some of that, in terms of shifting the special permit stuff primarily to the planning board, is that oftentimes, if there is a special permit for that type of use, it's also going to entail most
Site
likely
plan.
site plan, which is the planning board's function.
Okay.
So the idea was to really kind of make it one-stop shopping instead of having this sort of bifurcated process for a number of these special permit uses where they're before you, and then they get kicked, over to the zoning board, and basically basically just to streamline the process.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes
And but I think if we're going to get it, I might want to do things like if somebody's parking something in a wetland buffer today that the zoning board might not have looked at, we might want to say, can you move it, another 50 feet away? Can you do something? So I don't know if that's sort of the intention, but if we looked at a site plan, we would certainly say that. So anyway, there's some interesting nuances on things that seem like small changes, but
Yeah.
I have to figure out how we get to do it.
There may be,
Go ahead.
there may be occasions that we can have a joint meeting. Is that not a
That's
possibility?
possible, yeah.
Yeah, I don't
It's
know
not-
that the ZBA has the same set of sort of structure that we often do as we look at these things. Yes,
As somebody who benefited from a special permit to park contractors' equipment
Yep.
in the yard, I take a special interest in this, and I just want to
Yeah,
get
okay.
clear, okay? It was set up, when I went through it in the early 70s, okay,
Right.
was that there was a set of conditions that you had to meet. And if you met those conditions, the idea of a special permit is that you were granted it.
right,
So it took away a lot of gray area. You knew going in what you had to satisfy. And to the extent that that has been maintained that way, I can then, whether it's here or there, it doesn't matter. But it does matter to me that it's very specific about what you have to meet.
and I'm not sure that's still there, which is,
Well, then I'm gonna,
No, but any special permit, that's basically the construct of the special permit.
that's in the definition of it, basically.
Right. A special permit is a permanent use as of right is basically, you can do it. It might be subject to site plan, right, but I want to place this use in this zone, I can do it. A special permit, the idea is that certain types of uses have particular impacts or effects that like you said, the legislative body wants to make sure that, yeah, you can do it, but you can only do it if you satisfy very well-defined kind of target points in the code. So that remains for any special permit. Transferring it to this board simply means that this is the board that will be determining whether the applicant has shown that each of those is satisfied.
right.
Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest things that I might want to just sort of alert everybody to is the wetland code and the changes in that.
That's one I did.
So it looks like, first of all, the violations are actually issued by the code enforcement officer. Now, there does say in conjunction with the wetland inspector, or could be advised by the wetland inspector. But that's a pretty, so it's actually moving from Jan, if we talk individuals in the positions today, it's moving from Jan to Kevin. And so things that, or maybe it's actually, the way it will actually work is that Jan will have to go out with Kevin because Jan knows what a wetland looks like. I mean, he's a wetland professional, and Kevin isn't. So that's one thing. There's a lot of terminology that's changed that I don't think changes much. The activity implementation permit becomes an administrative permit. There's basically a planning board permit instead of an activity permit, so that helps, is okay. But I think the big thing that we should be aware of is, as you know, today we are kind of the adjudicators of a violation. It comes here. And if I understand correctly, it's moving to the courts. Is that, and what I worry is that,
Well, the idea is to try to move the adjudication piece to local courts as opposed to having the violations come here.
What I don't see in there
Yeah.
is the connection back, because typically when we get a violation,
We know that has
we
to-
then do a permit and make sure that things get done and improved with the permit. What I don't see is this, is that if something goes to the court, it wraps back around to us in any way. And I'm sensitive to this because in my long history of the town, people might remember years ago, there was someone who, it wasn't a wetland violation, but it was a violation that ended up going to the courts where someone overlooked the town park and cut all the trees in the town park. Not all, cut enough to have a view, but like an acre of trees, I mean, a lot of trees. And was told to replant and pay a fine. And I think a few trees were planted, no deer protection gone in days, and no fine was ever paid. So, different situation, but I'm worried about how, our goal always when we see a violation is not to punish somebody, but to get something corrected. And what I don't see in this is any loop back around that says,
So,
and I don't know if the court has the knowledge to say, and you must go get a wetland permit.
well, I think the rationale for that, and some of this comes from, what I see in other jurisdictions, and I'm not advocating one way or another, and
Right.
if the board wants to maintain that role, I get it. And, the Lewisboro construct is a little unusual. I won't say a little, it's
Very,
unusual.
yeah.
That the planning board would be vested with this authority to basically be the adjudicatory body for a violation. And in fact, years ago, there was a court challenge to that,
Yes.
to this kind of setup involving Lewisboro, and the argument was being made is that, wait a second, you're putting me as someone with a violation in front of like a body that's going to be adjudicating and finding, a civil penalty and imposing penalties, but at the same time, it'll be the board that I'd have to go to get, a permit to rectify things. But the court upheld it. The court found that the code provided all elements of due process, et cetera, et cetera. But having said that, it's still an outlier, and that most jurisdictions, these types of violations go to the local court. And just as with a building violation, oftentimes the local prosecutor will take a building violation into local court, and there'll be some sort of administrative process or remedy that's available, going to the zoning board of appeals and getting relief through a variance, or going to the planning board and getting approvals that they need. And the court will basically say, I'm sorry, this thing is. The judges just, and the prosecutors know the routine of, we're going to hold this, we're going to give you a date, go remedy it and come back. So it's not that seems to be kind of the process in most jurisdictions, which is, I think there's an assumption that would become, standard operating procedure.
Go ahead, Chris.
Here, yeah.
I understand. However, I have also found that anything that goes into the court stays in the court forever, and nothing ever really gets cleared up.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was working here, at least we had some kind of look-see.
Right.
It seems to go into a dark hole when it goes there, because it's a very complicated, and the courts are very, and I've been in that position in many courts, and there has to be a concerted effort.
Yeah, right. Well, another sort of past observation is that the current code, if you read it closely, there was actually an option that the wetland inspector, once the violation is once a violation occurred, could go, option A, go to the planning board, or could just take it into the local justice court. But the reason it kept coming to the planning board, at least for a long, I know several instances where a then sitting town judge said, I've got enough on my plate, I don't want to send them to the planning board. So.
And they don't also always understand the nuances
Yeah,
of the
that's-
issue.
Yeah, so
And there's no follow-up.
Right.
I mean, I think that,
Right.
if I'm correct, I think that's what Janet's saying. And I thought when we discussed that there was going to be
It's the privacy.
some ability to enforce it, and there would be follow-up, whether it be informing us, because Janet's right, if I have a violation, nobody ever tells them to go here.
Mhm.
That's not, they charge them like, $500 and it's over.
Right, so again,
So
I-
how
I'm-
do
So
you-
how
how
do
do
you, I mean.
right, I'm not against, if the town board says we want to change this,
Right.
Yeah.
that's okay. What I think is really important, though, is that either somehow we get notified or it is for follow-up. If somebody says it's a wetland violation, then maybe it's written into the code that they will have to also return to the planning board for
Permit, because.
a permit
Yeah,
for
okay.
remediation.
That's it, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
or something. I'm worried,
Yeah.
and again,
Because all there is the $250.
Right. Well, that's all the local court can do, right? I mean, in
And-
terms of enforcement,
Right.
I do wanna
But
say-
who makes them come to it's like a cost of doing business then.
yeah, well, and so
That's the
again,
problem.
that's a problem. Well, look, again, in practice, in a lot of jurisdictions, what the courts will do is use the fine and the risk of an accruing fine as basically the stick to get the person to go to the board. I'm just,
I know,
I'm
I've
just
been in,
explaining,
but
right, right. But the problem in terms of, like overall capability of the court, of a local justice court to say, you're gonna do this, X, Y, and Z, is that they don't have equitable power, meaning a local justice court, all it can do is impose fines.
Right.
And that's the only leverage it has. So, I can look at this and try to develop something that would keep them back, or the planning board can advocate to keep things as they are.
My-
yeah, go ahead.
My feeling, and some of it's based on experience, because I've had people in front of us in previous years who were told, no, they couldn't do something. And they didn't care what the cost was. They were going to get fined. I said, it's fine, I'll pay the money. I want to do what I want to do. On the other side of that, for us, and my opinion is, I'd like to keep it here, is it gives us, because we're here to help the people that live in this town try to do what they want to do in the best way that, it conforms, it doesn't hurt their neighbors, etc. And we can guide them through that. If it becomes a violation and gets shipped to the court, we never help the person who's in front of us, because we lose all that flexibility. We're not going to see it, as Janet said. So, I mean, my thought process is, I'd rather see them come back here with the violation. We very often say, guess what, we're not looking for a fine, we're looking for you
Exactly.
to correct
Right.
what was done wrong,
Right.
and understand what you can keep doing and what you shouldn't do.
I would
And I
agree
think
with that.
that's,
Okay.
that's the community-friendly way of doing it.
Yeah.
So I think you lose that with the court.
Yeah.
But
I think, no, John, I hear you,
And we're an unusual setup, yes, but that's, what makes the town great.
I only offer
Yeah,
that,
right.
like I said,
And-
I'm not pushing one way or another.
No, I know,
Right.
I
but
just
you got to talk to the town, so.
Yeah,
Well,
but I'm-
and we have to-
But I'm, at the end of the day, I'm assisting them, but at the end of the day, I'm the planning board's attorney, and if this is something you want to continue as you have, I'm happy to make that, to write this up and make those points that it actually, it helps it really is in terms of the person who the violation is issued. Oftentimes, residential homeowners who didn't even know.
They don't know,
Right.
right? It's educational.
That they're not having to go to two places, they just come to one. And that they're before a board that, I mean, and we tracked this at one point in time because there was a question as to what's our track record with fines? And we found that in most cases, we started this process years ago where we asked the applicant before we close out the violation piece, can you come in, you have an opportunity to speak, and give us an accounting of what you've spent? And typically the board looks at that and says, we're not going to add
Right.
to your role, you did what you're supposed to do. So I think you're correct from sort of a, kind of equity and just trying to treat people, not in a punitive way, but in let's do what we're supposed to do. It's working, so.
Yeah, and it works better because
Do we want
many of the judges that I work with
to ask here
would,
with us and say?
although they
let's
couldn't
go
do
that
anything, they say,
For this particular item?
we will fine you every day.
Every day, right.
Until
Right.
you get the application for comment.
Right.
That's a lot tougher than what we have here. However, I have not seen that done.
Right.
Because I know there's been a lot of changeover with personnel. It's a smaller place, so we're all neighbors.
Right.
And I think it's better here. We're not elected. We don't have any axe to grind.
Right.
And I agree with John. And the
Okay.
alternative, or if it's not possible because the board
Say something.
believes that, then there has to be some kind of remediation
She wants
or
to say something.
permit application
That's tied into the.
that's tied
yeah,
into
okay.
the violation.
Right.
Kirsten, did you?
A process question. I've seen Kevin going to Monday night court because as building inspector, he has to be in on these building violations. So now are we going to task Jan to attend the court for wetland violations? Just throwing that out
Yeah,
there.
and I just.
Well, I don't think so, because the code inspector is the one that goes,
Yeah, but I think there's a miscue, because it
Yeah,
does talk
there
about
is.
the West Wetland
Yeah,
consultant.
there
being
is.
the person to issue, to.
And
issue
that they can be
violations.
delegated the
Right,
power
and
by the town
delegate,
board.
yeah, Right,
Yeah.
so.
right. Oh, yeah, there's two
Yeah.
different places. Go ahead, Bruce.
There's always a lot of confusion I found between knowing who the wetland inspector is, number one, okay? And that needs to be clearly set out. It's been my experience that you're not going to get a consultant to want that title because it puts them in harm's way. They always wanted to have somebody who's on the town's payroll do that.
Right.
So therefore, the building inspector always had this put on their lap, okay? Which is all well and good, but if you want to do some favor for the building inspector, you'll give him some very clear direction about, what constitutes the violation, okay? And how it should go from there, and it has to be in the town code. It can't be something that is done based on who's in office at the time and what the latest
Right.
problem has been and how it was handled.
And-
Inconsistency is the kiss of death.
And what the town board thinks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I think actually, right now, Jan does have the title wetland inspector.
He does, yeah.
You may have that title, but you should, I'll bet you dollars to donuts, it's not in the code that way.
I think
that's what
it
they're
is,
looking-
I'd be
That's what
surprised
But-
if they would
but,
accept
so
it.
would you, do you have a preference to keep the wetland adjudication with the planning board or to give it to the courts? Do you?
No, based on what John had to say, I think that was the best reasosoning for that.
Yeah.
But as I
Yeah.
said, and I should have just waited for an opportunity to talk, but
That's right.
that hinges on the makeup of the board. Because if you have people on the board who realize what's the problem? The problem is that there's been a violation. What is going to make this go away? It's going to be the correction of the violation.
Right.
Okay?
Not the paying a fine, but
It's the
doing
whole
the right
idea
thing,
here is
yes.
to get back to where you were before It was. That's why the town didn't have a tree ordinance for a long time here, okay? Once the trees are down, you know, takes
That is
a long time.
Right.
But I think that and the other thing is if you're working in concert with the other town authorities that have jurisdiction in any given matter, the ideal is to have people come to realize you're better off if you go and ask permission first.
Yeah.
And there's reward for that, okay? And it becomes clear to people that that's the best thing to do. But if you have to start out by making that effort to have people, and you know best when you're whether or not you're giving people a decent break, or if you just looked at them and said, I've heard too much from your neighbors and whatnot, there's no way in the world you're ever going to get my vote. I mean, that's like...
Yeah, so but I think when you look at how we have adjudicated, and yes, it is somewhat dependent on the people on the board, but I think we should make the assumption that we have well-intentioned and, you know, wetland-aware, code-aware people sitting on this board.
Otherwise, it's just a matter of getting fined,
Right,
and it's the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
right,
And
No,
then,
I would back up based on what John
Yeah.
said.
right.
And what you're saying, Janet, that I have no problem with it staying here. I think the people who've come in for violations have been treated quite fairly.
Paul, I know you don't have a lot of experience. I don't
On
think
this
we've
side of
ever.
the
But do you have you know, just as a sense of this?
Yeah, I think it should be here at some point, and whether, I don't know if a violation can instantly trigger like an open permit on the property, that to close that, they have to come here as well as go to the court.
Yeah, I mean, what typically happens is work is just done without a permit.
Right.
So the violation's issued, they come here, and that's, well, the other issue is that at one point in time, the town had a separate attorney, basically the attorney who did all the local court work would appear before the planning board, and several years ago, the town made a decision that I'm going to do both, and I'm doing both, but it's, talk about wearing two hats. But in any event, when they come, so now I'm the person, when they come, the issue where step one is to get them to recognize it's a violation, they're before the board, explain what's happening, and to basically say, we're asking you to enter a guilty plea now, and my typical explanation is, it's a guilty plea, which means at the end of the day, you're going to, you know, the board's going to have the ability to impose a fine, but here's the way the board typically handles these. Talk to Jan, and they hear it from me, they also hear it from the board. Talk to Jan, develop a plan of remediation, file for a permit, an activity permit that can basically address the violation. And that's the typical course. So then, you know, if you look at this, you'll see a lot of these. We have one now with Mershon Valencia, so that carries two numbers, WV, because it's a violation, and WP, because they came in, they've now made a permit application. They go through the permit, oftentimes, as with Valencia, I think we referred that administrative last week.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, once the plan was.
So it goes administrative, and then when it's closed out, they come back, and we then close out the violation. So it's a little less cumbersome when you think about it. Because
But the difference between just opening a permit is that we do require a fee for the permit and an escrow, because there's going to be some oversight by legal and by Jan. And so just opening a permit doesn't give them, it's kind of in an odd way, the fact that they have an escrow that they want to get back, you know, by moving quickly.
No,
that
but
is
I'm
the
not even
motivation.
thinking of it, looking at that way, that
Yeah.
it's a wetlands permit that gets open, but something that's then on the property where selling a house, getting a mortgage, getting another permit, it stops them, because like you're saying, a fee's a fee, it's the way to do it, but in the same right, going to two boards, going to court and coming to planning, doing both steps is the difficult part.
Yeah,
And they
it's-
did do something wrong that they shouldn't do.
Right. Owners.
So I think John's absolutely right. Coming here is going to be better for them in the long run, and we don't want to make it difficult for them. But the step to go to court and deal with it is the penalty. That's my thought of it, you know.
Yeah.
Going to
Can
court,
they
see,
make them do
the-
both, though?
I think the problem that we're all having is when it goes to court, there's no follow-up, so no permit is going to be.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is
Yeah,
that's where,
that's
once
why-
the violation is issued, they
Yeah.
have to go to court, I mean, to deal with that violation, but at the same time, can't something be, like,
That-
can't the violation be issued onto the property card that now they have an open permit?
No, you can't, you have to have.
You have to have an
Yeah,
adjudication
yeah,
at the
you
end
have
of
to have
the
an
day,
adjudication
yeah.
of it. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
need to, I mean, the
Because of the
violation,
violation,
yeah.
you're still, if you're like just in the process of adjudicating, it means that nobody knows whether a permit is required or not.
Right.
Because it's just a violation. So it's like a court case.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, is that the violation issues two things. The violation is, one, the penalty that needs to be adjudicated to
Right.
provide
Yeah,
for
but you
what the
have to
fine is.
adjudicate the penalty before you get that open permit, and it doesn't really become an open permit. It really,
Well, I know, but that's what I'm saying, is why can't the violation create the open permit? That's the,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I think,
guess
so
the-
what you're saying is the same thing. We need some linkage back here.
Yes.
Right.
So,
instead
So-
of just going here.
Right.
I think I'm fine, if everyone's agreeing that it should just go here, I mean, I'm not against that.
right,
But I
Just
don't
seem
see the
simple.
negativity of having it go to court as well. I think both have to happen, or at least just the board is fine.
Right.
I
So,
would think it's
and-
a nice thing to have the court.
and I
issues.
think that tie-in, because I think it is a town board decision, so the town board is going to decide. And I think what we need to make sure is to say, look, we prefer, because we want to make sure that the situation is remedied. That's our care, that's what we care about. We don't care about the fine, but we care about the situation being remedied. If you decide that it has to go to the court, figure out a way to make sure that it gets back and it becomes in. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, and, the method, we have to figure it out, but I think that's the main message, if we're gonna talk about, how this aspect of it, that's, I think, our message is it just can't go to court and fly away.
But that's not simple for the homeowner. That's not the simplest way to do it.
no, but,
Yeah,
Be that
it's
as
up to the.
do we know how the violations that don't come to us are adjudicated? How many are adjudicated? How many go to permit? How many are just
I would
hanging
have
out
to talk to
there?
Greg Monteleone, I don't know.
I mean, I think that would give us
Yeah, I
a
can talk to him.
a
mean,
good
we-
idea of, what's going on there, and because I don't know how many we have seen as in the process from the court.
Right, I mean, we do know.
How many have been referred to us through a violation situation?
I mean, I think we know of some things that have never come back to us.
Yes, we know,
But,
but, yeah, I don't know.
I have no
because,
idea if
I know
that's
that-
the
that
one
there's
exception
some
or the two
things-
exception, or if that's the universal issue.
There's some things that go in there and never heard from again.
Yeah. Okay, so,
So,
I mean, and at some point Valerie, I think, is going to come, and we should have the same kind of discussion with her. But, I mean,
Yeah,
right
so-
now, Judd, you're sort of carrying the water for us a little bit.
No, so, and just a couple of things. One, and, having participated in the steering committee meetings, these are drafts that, I can't say that this is like, that this has complete town board buy-in at this point at all. I don't think they've really focused or You know, so that's what this process is ongoing, so, I don't think there's been a clear determination or there's a definite feeling on the town board that this existing process should be tampered with or upset. I think this is more the product of the committee, maybe Valerie, just in, again, a sense that the more normal process is to set it up this way. So that's just one point. I don't want anybody to think that this is like set in stone. The other thing is just in terms of like follow-up to tonight, and I'm not trying to make, but what if I begin to like just to draft kind of, assuming that this eventually is going to become
I
something.
would say go for it right away, but it's not just my call.
No, I think-
Basically like, town board, these are our concerns.
Yeah.
And maybe even begin to communicate that now, so that,
I think the earlier in the process
Yeah.
it can get communicated, the better off it is. And then if we have to end up in a formal letter, that's okay too.
I also
And I
think-
have to say, I tried some of these things on, as part of the committee and didn't always get there, but I think if
Yeah.
it helps to have the board having
the board is-
discussed it.
Yeah, right. I also think, I think in some respects, maybe the impetus behind this is that there's a thought that they're doing the planning board a favor of taking something off your plate.
I think they're also looking
I-
at
I'm
what
just-
the norm is.
I think,
And
John,
that's.
I think that's for
really-
Valerie,
I've dealt
for
with
sure.
that in
That's
corporate
what
life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely Valerie, but I think, and we are getting some new things, so, yeah, I mean, but I still think, if you think of the goal for the town of Lewisboro, or for the residents of the town of Lewisboro, I think it's better to be here. And,
Well,
I
I do think that enforcement is an issue, and we can't even address enforcement until we know how it's really being enforced
Mhm.
and what the soft spots are.
that's a
Because-
broader issue,
Yeah.
enforcement.
That's a broader
Yeah,
issue,
it's a broader issue on all zoning and looking
Yeah.
at all zoning, and maybe we should look at that as to, how it works.
Mhm.
Because I tell you,
That's a discussion with Jan and Kevin, quite frankly, in terms of,
well, I think the town board should be aware of it too. I mean, you're passing a comprehensive plan, and, one of the things that came up in the comprehensive plan was enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
And they said there was a lack of enforcement.
And especially around septics, we heard that loud
Yeah.
and clear.
It was just like,
But-
that was
but
one of
other
the
things
issues,
as well.
lack of enforcement.
I think
And-
trees, too.
Now I'm thinking of it, which is stupid because I should have thought about it before. How does it work? Is it working? Is it not working?
So on a similar issue, maybe, so when I read the new proposed steep slope, we don't have a good steep slope thing. I mean, our current steep slope,
Say that
code says.
times.
Sorry, one
It's
quick.
Oh, yes, yes.
embedded in your- yeah,
Just
it's
one
embedded
thing
in-
I saw on wetlands before you jump to.
Yeah,
steep
yeah.
slope. I was, the new section on administrative permits
Right.
outlined what could fall into that, and it was a swimming pool no closer than 50 feet to wetlands. I was a little confused on that, because that's a massive excavation process.
Yeah, we could say that should be, that should come to us. I mean, one of the things that I worry about, especially if somebody comes to us, we can kind of say, you don't really want a salt pool, do you? I mean, and try to get them
Right.
into the, so that's a good,
I thought that was discussed and some people didn't want that because it's too onerous.
it was
But
too onerous, but I think we can,
I think we should bring it up.
we should bring it up, because it
Because
is,
it's too onerous to come, well,
To
it
us.
just seems like those, of the types of construction, I mean, the shed in the wetlands had to go, that's a lot easier than a pool, that's why I was confused. Right.
It just, there were some people who thought it was too onerous. That's
Right.
all. It wasn't us.
Yeah, no, I was just curious.
no, but
I
again, I
noticed that.
think having the voice of the board as opposed to one or two people in
Yeah,
a
I
big
agree.
committee.
Or it's changed to an above-ground pool. That could be, maybe that's what it is. let
Until
be
it
an
breaks.
above-ground pool, and then-
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
No,
And then the
that's-
other one was, they had, and this is kind of with the tree section or steep, so clear cutting, I couldn't find the definition of what clear cutting is. And we start to bring it up now. in
Right.
A couple new sections of it.
Yes.
I apologize, Paul, definition of what?
Clear cutting?
Clear cutting.
Oh,
So
wasn't-
it
wasn't
used to
particularly
be-
defined, yeah.
Certain number
It
of
used to
trees
be,
per
in
acre.
our old tree ordinance had clear cutting, and it was cutting 5 acres or more
Oh,
of
wow.
trees.
Yeah, that's aggressive.
That's pretty clear. And in the tree ordinance, it was a little, I remember it was left a little vague, because when we were trying to get it through, we said, everybody agreed that they shouldn't allow clear cutting, but they didn't know what it was. So they sort of were back at the, 3 trees per acre, kind of, okay, you get that. And the tree has to be 8 inches in diameter. Okay, so you can cut a whole bunch of trees, but only 3 big ones, And so it was tough, but I don't, I think they wanted to get rid of the clear cutting defined as 5 acres or more, because that's just,
Yeah.
that's egregious.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So we don't have a definition now for clear cutting.
It is in there someplace, because I remember reading it. It's 4-inch caliper, chest height.
That's
X by-
wetland, that's the wetland, because the wetland has the 4-inch.
Okay.
Yeah, there was something about 8-inch diameters classifying what a tree is.
Right, that's a definition of a tree for the tree
For the
ordinance.
tree ordinance, but, maybe there's a link that I just didn't see, and that's what I'm
No,
asking.
so- Yeah, so there is a definition in the wetland code.
Okay.
Any cutting of live trees 4 inches or more in diameter at breast height above the ground by more than 30% per contiguous acre of any wetland and/or regulated buffer area during the 10-year period is determined on the basis of wetland area per lot or group of lots under single ownership.
So that's clear cutting within a wetland, though.
Yes,
Yeah, that's clear cutting within a wetland.
Okay. So we don't have
Within
a
the
clear
wetland,
cutting outside of
not
the
wetland
wetland.
above.
So-
maybe we have
Or a buffer,
something-
no,
Or a buffer.
wetland or a regulated buffer.
Yeah.
or buffer.
So
But
outside of that. we
outside
don't-
of that, now the tree ordinance of the
Yeah.
3 8-inch ones takes over, or
Takes
3
over.
per acre.
Okay, so it is covered. All right, I just didn't see it.
Yeah, we
I
had
apologize.
one case before us, not too long ago, the last meeting before, that they clear cut.
Oh, I remember, yes, I
Yeah.
remember I was kind of the tail end of that,
Yeah.
yes. Okay. So that was, I'm sorry, so now steep slopes, that's fine.
Steep slopes. So right now, our current steep slope ordinance is sort of embedded in some, and it's just kind of this, try to stay away from steep slopes. But so now there's a new one that's proposed that basically, if I understand it correctly, defines 3 different categories of steep. The steep, the very steep, and the extremely steep. And the only thing that now comes to the planning board is extremely steep. And I also sort of object to that. To me, first of all, if you look at maps, all sorts of maps have 15 and 25%. Almost no map that I've ever seen has, okay, these are the 35% steep slopes. So I don't know, unless somebody is actually doing a site plan and has an architect in or has a designer in and is doing surveys and figures it out,
No.
will even know that they've got 35%. So they won't know to come to the planning board.
Does that, I'd have to look, but would that be picked up on an environmental clearance form at the outset of?
No.
No.
The environmental
Or the
questionnaire
yeah,
is
yeah,
only wetlands.
Yeah.
So there's no way that somebody's going to know. And honestly, it would be really tough, even if we added it to for somebody to go out and look and say, oh, that looks like, it's, is that 32% or 37% steepness? And I just think I think if you want to have So we used to get involved because it was avoid steep slopes if you can.
Right.
Now we're not going to see it. It's going to go to the building inspector, I think. And we'll never see it unless it's more than 35%, which nobody is ever going to know unless they're doing a big site plan anyway. In which case, we would have a chance to kind of, so I think it's a flawed definition. Valerie, I brought this up to her and she said, well, there's, 35%. If somebody's doing a site plan, they'll know it's 35%. But I think of some of the people that we see that say, I want to put a pool in, or I want to redo my driveway, or I want to do something. They're not necessarily having this and know, I mean, one would hope they'd stay off 35% slopes, but again, there are all sorts of maps everywhere that you can find that say it's 15 or 25%, but almost nothing that says 35. So I'm seeing that as a weakening as opposed to a strengthening of the steep slope. And if people really want to protect steep slopes, I think they've got to come to us at 25%. Or something, or it's got to be
From what I
rewritten.
remember, I think that we would need a discussion with Jan about this,
Yeah,
because he had some input into the 35%.
Okay, I agree. I mean, he did, but I wanted to bring that up to the
and-
board
and I
because.
agree that you're right, it's never going to come before us.
Unless it's incidental to,
Yes.
Golden Bridge Shopping Center redoing
Right.
a lot
Right.
of stuff.
Why do we need it to come in front of us?
Because
The builder inspector's
today-
going to look at it, the engineers are going to look at it.
Today, if something is on steep slopes, it kind of, I mean, the wording is avoid it, try to avoid it. It doesn't, the code now says, you can just, it doesn't say that the building inspector will try to keep you off of it, or try to talk you down and
no,
onto the,
it's
it's
definitive.
basically, they'll give you permission. So they'll make sure that the right engineering of if they need an engineered wall or something, they'll make sure that's done. But they won't necessarily say, if you move this thing, if you driveway came in the opposite side of the lot, you don't have to go over a steep slope to get there, because it's only,
But I'm-
28%.
But I'll go back to, I'm playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, no,
But I'm
it's
going back to, why? Why are we saying, it's okay or totally avoid it? Steep slopes with the technology and everything that exists today, a normal person designing a site is going to avoid the extra work, but if they can't, then they have to deal with it from a technical point of view.
So you are saying that they're going to avoid the extra work, but I've listened to, 4 months of rock hammering as somebody has tried to change, they're building a new house on top of a rock outcropping in North Salem, which happens to be on the downhill side into the South Salem. And you can hear over a large portion of the town this rock hammering that's been going on as they've tried to redo an area so that they can put a swimming pool over the edge of the
Right.
cliff.
And look out, yes.
And, what's they're invisible or something, the swimming pools that have,
Infinity.
what?
Infinity.
Infinity?
Infinity, right, well, yeah. So they can swim off into Lewisboro. And so it's a, I understand what you're saying, it doesn't, you would think that people would avoid it. I
Well,
don't.
that's the exception, I would think. I don't think a lot of people are doing that, but I've got your point, but if they came to us and that's the site,
Then
would we
we-
say, no, you can't do it?
We would probably say, is there an alternative? Do you have a different way you could do this? the question is, we would say that. I don't know that the building inspector is going to say anything other than,
No, he's just going to tell you what you have to do.
if you
to
do that,
it.
you have to have an engineered
Yeah,
wall,
right,
you
right.
have to make sure that you
Right.
have the fill is right, that the foundation is something,
No, I got it.
under the
So
Frost
30
line.
34 feet.
percent
that
slope.
percent-
yeah.
Percent slope can be as of right.
That's the way, no,
No.
not as of right, you have to go to the building
Yeah,
inspector.
But as of right.
But you don't, he doesn't, we
It
don't know.
doesn't go to us.
But he'd come to
Nobody.
you, no, 25 and 35 would come to you.
Oh,
I think
25.
only
I thought
35.
only 35.
I thought it was only
If it's
35.
25 and 35, then that's,
If it's, I thought 25 goes to,
I'll go back.
yeah,
and that was my,
yeah. Like, I think, because then 34% would just go to the building, and it's as of right, as long as he follows the building,
the code.
yeah.
And that's, so that was one,
No, I have, for any applicant, this is section 5. The approving authority for applications shall be, A, for any application that involves a regulated disturbance in any area of very steep slope or extremely steep slope. So varies 25
let me look.
Extremely is 35.
and extremely is 35.
Because I thought, when I looked, the regulating agency for very steep was the building inspector.
It's the town engineer.
Town engineer,
Yeah.
okay.
Well,
Okay, well, anyway, that's something to
Yeah,
check.
no, yeah.
But-
It's also, well, it's sort of a philosophical or approach question about your point in terms of imposing a more kind of regimented, just approval process or permitting process as opposed to having the current construct of stable. I'm not, again, I'm just kind of pointing it out. I think this is a discussion you should have with Jan and Valerie.
Okay.
John, from your perspective, I mean, a
Question.
lot of towns who do have steep slope permits note not doing work and basically create it as you need a variance or you need a special use permit to do work in the steep slope. So ours is just, you have to get a permit. So from your sense, if they're gonna do it right, it's just a step to get a permit to do the work. So it's kind of a mix of what you're saying. I know coming to us would be difficult, but at least they can do work, because some towns will just say,
No.
All right,
Bruce has a question.
yeah, so steep slopes. I'm sorry.
So I have a question.
Yes.
When it comes to the steep slopes, or for whatever need there is to either blast or to do rock hammering, I've always been trying to figure out, is the objection to what is being done or the objection to rock hammering? Because the town has a very difficult blasting ordinance,
Right.
the most difficult of any town around. It's just, and so they automatically go to rock hammering, not understanding that it can be a lot more expensive. And it creates a nightmare when it comes to all of the objections that are being called in about it. And understandably so, I'm not, but the blasting ordinance here is just extremely difficult.
Yeah, it protects the wells, they have to go do all sorts of stuff.
But what a blaster has to go through today gives a lot of assurances that,
Yeah. So I think that the general thing is, the aim is to try to get people to avoid steep slopes, to avoid disrupting them.
Okay,
Because, and so making it, I think there was a lot of fear for a long time that blasting could have, repercussions, that are not seen. So people are worried about their wells if any blasting happens. Rock hammering, I think, sort of falls into the preferred thing in that case, just because it's in my mind, this sort of avoid steep slopes if you can. It is expensive. it's painful to do rock hammering. And it sort of incents people to sort of say, let me figure out if I can do it with either the minimal amount of rock hammering or avoid that area. Yeah. So, but the real steep slopes often have some environmental aspects that are helpful to preserve for, I guess it's sort of true anywhere. I mean, if you disturb the landscape, you're disturbing the landscape. But often, if you're disturbing a steep slope, it has more ramifications in terms of runoff or, you know,
Yeah.
other issues. And so that's why it's kind of, let's avoid steep slopes. I just think if the idea is to try to protect steep slopes, that I'm not sure that as written, this thing really does it. I think it brings extreme steep slopes into our purview, but it doesn't kind of say, I'm encouraging you to stay away from steep slopes in general. It's kind of like, go get a permit. Or go get approval from the inspector.
I think the stormwater issue is important with the steep slope. And I think it's becoming more and more important. I mean, John,
Especially as we have rains like this.
Right, and it's constant. This is
Right.
like, 100-year flood. But John, I understand that, that it may be safe for all other purposes. And engineering, you could do it, but there's a stormwater issue management issue that I think we need more of a look-see, because that disturbing a steep slope will cause the runoff problem to increase.
It could.
And there's also, I don't know, calcareous slopes that are really important to a lot of creatures. I don't know. But not every steep slope is that, but that's a whole.
I'm not saying it
I know.
shouldn't come here, I was just asking the why.
Right.
It says they need to provide a stormwater, like a SWIP.
The SWIP, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So they do
at
have
that
to.
point, they may even have to come to us, depending on thresholds they hit for SWIPs. They may need to be here for a stormwater pollution prevention, for a stormwater permit.
Maybe.
You know,
Maybe.
just from the
Yeah,
scale
yeah.
perspective, what
From
you're
the
talking
scale.
about, then there might be something that also grabs.
Right. But
because-
if we can't talk to them about the slope, we can only talk to them about whether or not they're complying with stormwater
Yeah.
compliance. That's where I just, I think, so I have two more things that I really sort of feel strongly about, and I can keep going on my things. One of them is, so we finally got EV parking in so that it needs a permit, but it started off when Valerie first put it in, that if you needed 20 spaces and you wanted to put 2 EV parking in, they wouldn't count towards the 20. I got that off, I think. So now if you need 20 spaces for your use and 2 of them are EV, that's okay. Just like if there's a handicap, that counts, so it's all,
Equitable.
yeah, it's all equitable, so it doesn't disadvantage EV parking. What it does not allow us to do is if somebody is putting in a store or something, it doesn't allow us to say, we want 5% or 10% or something to be EV. And as I listen to people during the comprehensive plan, this whole thing about sustainability and renewability and, forward thinking and technology and everything, I would really like us to have the ability, not just, if somebody's doing a change of use, okay, no, maybe we won't be able to say EV. But if you start tearing up a parking lot anywhere, I want to be able to say, or at least that would be my preference, and I'm seeing what the rest of you guys think, to be able to say, we want so many to be EV, some percentage. And this all, because we get to look at, when Richfield put in a new parking rule, they basically said that for any parking lot that has more than 20 spaces, you have to have 10% of them be EV charging spaces. So I just, that would be one thing that I would consider asking or suggesting that we suggest to the town board be added to the.
I agree, but I have a vested interest.
Yeah. But-
I don't know if
I do
the 10,
too.
I don't know if
That's why I would
10% is the right number.
I don't know
but
if it
the
is, but
concept-
something.
Conceptually, that's fine.
Or even just be
I'm
able
okay
to
with that.
ask them, whatever you feel is right, we want something in there.
I'm fine with that.
You know, I think,
I think
again,
that's
I don't
smart.
know, I looked at Richfield and we can see how theirs is going. And they won't do it if it's, if you need 3 parking spaces, they don't make it then. But if it's a relatively large lot, put it in.
I agree. New York State incentives right now can basically make it free to install them for any of these developers, so,
Right,
absolutely.
okay. The other thing I had, and I've had some discussion with this with Valerie as well, there's a new thing that talks about the animals you can have in a residential area. So they went way up, but in addition, at least for me, I don't see anything that says you can only have, choose one of these categories, or maybe choose pigs and poultry, but you can't have, 30 sheep plus 25 pigs
No, you
plus
don't.
10 cattle,
2 of each.
all on the same piece of property, so if 10 acres allows you to have 30 sheep and allows you to have 25 pigs, you can't have both of them, but the code does not say that anywhere.
So that needs to be clarified.
So that bugs me, and the numbers seem pretty high to me, actually, in a residential. If my next door neighbor, and I'm not saying anything bad about my next door neighbor, but if they came in with, 25 pigs, I might have a problem.
I don't remember the threshold.
But remember, if
This
that
is-
also would then incorporate, then you've got to deal with the manure, the storage, the feed, all of those other things are going to come into play. I think that just deals with the animal number.
It deals with
But
the.
I agree with the
Right.
part that you can't have both on the same.
Right, not
store.
everything. That's in supplemental regulations. The other thing
Does it require a
is,
special permit?
it does require a
Yes.
special permit. But it is
Yeah, I mean,
on 2 acres, you can have 30 sheep.
Jesus.
I think these numbers, just to me, it's one thing if you are a farm, but if you are in a residential district, 2 acre zoning, to be able to have 30 sheep and,
Even 30 sheep on 2 acres is a lot.
right, so, and then the other thing is that it doesn't give us anything. So I happen to have, at least it's a rumor, that there's somebody who has wallabies in town, that there is somebody, so there ought to be something that says other animals at planning board discretion, at the special permit discretion, because
Well, we can
What was the-
challenge the numbers on this
Yeah.
because we don't know where they came from.
Valerie, who said, yours numbers are too small. We have really, today's numbers are really low, but these numbers seem
Hi.
high. But it seemed, there was somebody who just had an alligator on their property. Now, I hope nobody's going to come to us for a special permit for an alligator, but, I think we ought to be able to, other animals at planning board discretion.
I
That's-
have no problem with that.
Yeah.
Because there are some,
This is in the supplemental regulations.
Yeah, it's section 220,
Uh,
yeah,
Well, it's going to be a special permit, you got to
yeah.
have some
I read the chart too,
guidelines,
'cause I was
right?
looking for
Well,
a particular animal that I know somebody.
the guidelines are really, you can have
Right.
30 sheep on 2 acres, and you have to, it does say, let me look at where this is. Supplemental regulations is the name of it.
Yes.
Do you remember what section?
And I'll have to go down and look.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's,
Private kennels. It's
I had to look up
22039.
what's the difference between a wallaby and a
That's
kangaroo.
what just.
they're similar. I don't, I wouldn't know the
They're
difference.
smaller.
They're smaller?
Yeah, they're shorter.
Because there was on something on Facebook where somebody had lost one, it was wandering, and they were looking for it, and they were afraid it was out in the cold, and it was, please bring our pet wallaby back to us.
Kangaroos are much taller than wallabies.
Yeah, they're small.
But, yeah, and then that sort of brings me back around to special permits where it's not clear to me that there are some special permits that seem to have like a 2-year upstage, and then there are some that just seem to be open-ended forever. And it wasn't clear to me which ones are which as I started looking at
Yeah.
this. Or who gets to decide I might think that if you were putting 30 sheep on 2 acres,
And how then do you,
oh, maybe I don't see it in there.
how do
Might be in
you
the district regulation.
retract a special permit for like 30, like, what do the sheep have to do to be thrown out? Like, once you give the special permit,
Right.
even if it has to be renewed every 2 years,
Right.
on what basis can you not renew?
If the
They're too noisy,
Yeah.
they're too smelly?
The conditions now actually indicate that the standards aren't satisfied for the special permit.
But what are the standards for, like,
There's a set of like general standards for all special permits, but they're.
yeah, but not, and they don't know where you put the manure, where you,
Right, yeah.
there's none of that. So once that special permit is granted, it seems like impossible
I
to
don't
take
see
it
it in
back.
this. And I know I printed this off of something,
I
but,
read
No,
it.
it's in there, I read it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, I know it's, I'll find it, don't worry.
but to me, sort of to say, to sort of set the expectations that choose one of these. And maybe you can have chickens if you have horses, I don't know, but not sheep
Categorize
and
them
goats
in
and,
something like that? Categorize maybe by size of.
or
species
say
or something
you can
like
have
that.
poultry
Choose
and
something.
one other.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Like if you had
'cause-
horses and chickens, that's
Yeah.
okay. or-
Yeah, but
But if you like horses, you
But
can
you
have
but you're
two,
doubling the space. In other words, if you use the space, okay.
I don't know.
You covered it already.
I
but-
don't know. That's,
you
yeah.
have two from column A and one from column B.
Well, I just am uncomfortable with
Yeah.
this as it's stated, because I think most of us, if our next door neighbor said, I'm going to bring, I have 2 acres and I'm going to put on, so pigs are 3 acres. I have 3 acres and I'm going to bring in 25 adults with up to 5 sows with litters. We
Jesus.
might not be,
And I was
just-
asked Judd, how can we pull the permit? if
Yeah,
Things
no,
are not going, there's no criteria for that.
well, that would be, so there is some criteria that says you have to keep them set back, you have to, but
Is it quite a distance?
But in a residential area,
Right, that's what I mean.
It's-
It's
I
going to be
think-
hard to,
the neighbors start complaining, or do you have,
you can't do it on that basis.
I know, what,
But what I mean is like you have 30 sheep, that you were allowed to have 30 sheep. And it turns out that even with the manure storage, it's smelly, dirty, and unsightly.
and the ground is all churned up.
Right.
If you have rains like you have now, even if you're not in a wetland, you might have mud. So I don't know, anyway, I just,
You
That
know,
one needs to be looked at.
there's an organization that works closely with people who have farm operations. And it's called, I think it's the Westchester Ag Council, or,
Yeah.
they're headquartered over on Hanover Farm
Right.
in Yorktown, okay? And they are an advocate for farming operations, but they have to be legitimate farming operations, and they meet certain criteria to be eligible for that, okay? But they provide, they're a wonderful resource for farm operations. Just as an idea as to what they would consider an impossible situation to, properly manage, find out if they have any, because they're interfacing with, between the DEC and all the,
Ag and markets.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Yeah, ag
Yeah.
and markets.
Ag and
Yeah.
markets, yeah, and
Yeah.
they're very familiar with that, because they were, if people are serious about doing this, then they want to know right away about, can I get that classification in terms of my property, that it's an agricultural.
But this is
These
not-
aren't- this-
these-
this is-
residential.
This is
I
for some people in
understand, but-
No,
residential.
but I think Bruce's point is just to get a sense from them
Yeah.
as to
What they would recommend.
What's
what would they-
realistic and
would
what
they
isn't.
consider to be
What's
like-
residential,
For instance,
how
if
much
you
is
said-
it for
Yeah.
Right, right.
residential?
And so, but we also do know of people that have, I think if you have 10 alpacas or 10 llamas, you can get an agricultural deduction.
Actually, you have to make a certain amount of money.
You have to make money 1 year out of 5 or something.
There's a $10,000 threshold, it used to be $10,000
Yeah.
threshold. You had to be, you could take in 10,000 and it costs you 20,000 to get that. That's none of their business. They want to know that you take in a minimum of $10,000
It's got to be a
a
work,
year.
it's got to be a real
They have
business.
some and you also have to be in an ag district. You can't do this outside of an ag.
You
won't
can't
get
do the
any help.
residential.
You won't get any help from them if you're outside of the ag district.
Okay. Well, anyway, to me, if I'm looking at areas that need more refinement or consideration, this one bothered me in that category. So that's,
No, that makes sense.
yeah.
30 on 2 acres?
I would.
30 sheep, well, and it's sheep,
yeah.
goats, so I don't know if that means you could have 30
Not that
sheep
big.
and 30 goats. I'm
Yeah.
assuming not. But anyway, so it's all, those were the, I think excavation and fill, so now that's a new category. And I just, they put in, it applies when there's 15 yards of excavation or fill. And so because that doesn't mean anything to me, I looked it up. And so like a dump truck is like 14 yards. So I don't know if they went to 15 yards just because that's a slightly bigger dump truck or just visually. But I looked it up. If you had a dumpster 16 feet long by 7.5 feet wide by 4.5 feet high. So that doesn't seem like a really egregious,
Yeah, I
that seems
thought it
like a
was very
pretty
low.
small, right?
Yeah, I thought it was very low.
You thought what, Paul?
I thought it was low for that
Oh, yeah.
requiring 15
I mean,
yards is
15
nothing.
yards of just,
I mean,
Yeah.
properties here get
Material.
15 yards of mulch in,
Yeah.
a season, so.
So they say stuff they use for agriculture, like you can put on topsoil and you can do all that. It's the excavation and or fill.
Right, yeah.
But I don't really care, but it does seem sort
It's
of
low.
like a dump truck, It seemed,
Yeah, I think it's pretty low, because chances are we're gonna catch the project from some other reason.
Yeah.
That 15 yards is nothing. I agree, I think that should definitely be raised. That's-
yeah, but, that, to me, I'll let wiser people kind of,
that's for, if you're exporting it off, or
Either one,
Either.
either.
it says excavation or fill. So if you are
Yeah.
bringing in 15
Or
or
taking out 15.
15.
And to me, it just, when somebody says 15 yards, it means nothing to me. So I had to do It's a dumpster. It's not a
These are
huge
wheelbarrows.
dumpster.
Well, the other thing is that 15 yards on a truck becomes like 10 yards in the ground after it goes through compaction and everything else. You know, taking fill out of the ground is like popcorn. It's, you know.
It keeps on coming.
Yeah,
Gets bigger.
It swells.
Bigger.
And that's the big thing about rock. It's the same way. It can be very misleading. I don't know, I've got to believe that figure was put in there just to generate so that they knew that it was going to change. There's no way in the world.
So
There's a
that
big
might be
space
another
out
thing to
there,
ask
so maybe it's
Jan,
1,500.
Yeah.
what he would recommend. Because to me, I'm looking at that, and to me,
So the comment is it's too low.
I don't know.
And
I
are you
mean-
You're going to
let 'em
count
come back with
gravel
a new
and
one.
things like that. You can bring in gravel in excess of 20 or 30 yards just for your curtain drain, for your
Driveway.
septic fields, for specialized material. And then that means that's going to be replaced by what's going out, and you're still a net zero.
right.
I mean, now you have to go get,
No, this is why we need people who understand practical. Like I said, I had to go look what
Yeah.
that size was, because it didn't, 15 yards sounds like,
Yeah, and like Bruce is saying, the way they write it is filling, excavating, regrading, removal, stripping, topsoil, earth, sand, gravel, or rock. And cubic yardage, well, yes, they all come in those. They're very different thresholds of what that is,
right.
you
Yeah.
know? You can't really define.
they're selling more
Regrading
and more
in
material
yard,
by
yeah,
the
it's
ton
like-
now, too.
Yeah,
Well-
ton is, yeah, so it's weird. That definitely needs clarification, and I think it's very small.
okay, because I just, again, reading through this, to me,
No, he's got it.
it is what it is.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know if I had I have to say, once I recognized that we were going to be doing this for a while, I pulled back a little, but I kind of thought, we do so much with wetlands, that was an important one to talk about, and then some of these others. So I will mention that Kirsten handed out to you something, which is this, it's hard to see on this, the difference between current and plan zoning.
Just look at the red.
Yeah. So the point, I think, of it, though, is that any special use permit, essentially, except if it says SPT, all of those are going to be coming to us. So there's going to be, I think, possibly some more. A lot of them are not, not that much new. But yeah.
And keep in mind, well, the other thing is, and it doesn't relate as to what's coming to you, but one of the things in terms of staging that came out of last week's discussion was that with regard to consideration of the battery energy storage provisions and the solar, that's likely to be kind of tabled at this point. In other words, we'll get through the comp plan. I think the town board wants to take more time at looking at that, but they don't want that to hold up getting everything else through. So, not to say it's not going to happen, but I think there was a sense, my sense or my takeaway from that is that those are likely going to be the subject of further review, and you'll see those further down the road.
Yeah, I had one question. The ground mount solar systems had like 100-foot setback, which seemed aggressive. So we'll glad we'll see it
yes,
later.
I think there was kind of a recognition that those need to be
That's good.
looked at a little more
Well,
thoroughly, even before they get.
yeah, right now, for residential areas, they won't allow ground-mounted solar in the front yard, or even,
Well, that's what,
Right.
yeah, that makes sense.
and
Well, it depends on
it
your
depends,
property, though.
yes, so we had
Well, then
somebody
you get
come.
a special use permit, or
No, we
variance.
had somebody who came to us because their front yard was like 2 miles, right? And they were putting it on the site plan. And so, that was that.
Right, but those
it was,
are special
right.
situations, right, that
Right.
merit.
So that's kind of what I had. I don't know if anybody else has anything else. I mean,
I had one on wireless.
oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
And it may be because this exists already and I didn't know it, but there's a clause in there that says if the town puts it on town property, they don't have to pay attention to pretty much anything.
So,
They can do what they want. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
okay, well,
Well,
And I'm
They
sure I'm
can-
not
they can
reading
do
it
that.
correctly, but
no, you are.
Yeah,
It's
they can-
exempt, it's exempt.
Yeah.
So what, yeah, where that comes from is that, and if the, and we had it with the volunteer ambulance corps property,
and one other one, I think.
and yeah, there was
the
another
town
one,
park was a big to-do,
but
that was not exempt. Okay.
yeah, but with what the town board did with the ambulance corps is when the town, when there is activity proposed on town property that is like arguably subject to zoning, the town can take the position that it's not. They have to conduct what's known as a Monroe test. The legislative body can actually look at whether certain activity on municipally owned property should or should not be subject to zoning processes. And Monroe comes from County of Monroe. It's a case that was decided by the Court of Appeals years ago. And there's an analysis that the court laid out because there is an exemption. There is a recognition that a municipality is exempt from zoning when it's conducting
Municipal business.
yeah, municipal business. So the question is, under County Monroe is when does something that the municipality is doing, when does it cross from being kind of municipal oriented to
Private.
quote, private or kind of quasi? But the town board can conduct this Monroe hearing, and if they make a determination under the Monroe factors, they can take that position. So they did that in the ambulance corps. Because up to that point, most of these, wherever they were, I even think the town,
I think they
predated me,
did
but
it.
I think the town park one came to us, did it not?
It did come to us, and I
Yeah.
think the Vista one was also Monroe.
Right.
But I think, and when the first of those came through, we had just gone through and done the town park and done
Right.
all this, the color has to match
Yeah,
the
I was-
trees
yeah,
down
right.
below
I
and the
was on the
sky
board
up
when that
above
happened.
and all this
Yeah.
stuff that happened, and then
So that won't have to happen anymore? Is
That won't
basically.
happen anymore.
and I
Because we
was,
did Vista
Yeah.
too. We did Vista too. I remember going back there and looking at the site.
yeah, but then they did something, I think they did something else in there, and they sort of said, okay, we're taking it. The town basically took it, and I said,
definitely recall it with the ambulance. That
The
might have been
ambulance
one-
too.
The one
That was in like 75.
So it was more recent.
No, the ambulance, the
Oh, they
recent
did
one.
something more recently.
yeah.
Yeah.
But what I was kind of taken aback, kind of, because we had said, wait, we did all this stuff about color and noise
Right.
and generators and,
Right.
and they don't have our history of doing all that. And it's true,
Well,
like,
you're
they
gonna
don't.
get the
so.
builder who's gonna do whatever he wants at that point. The town's gonna say, fine, it's revenue, go ahead and do it.
Well, they're also, I think, less experienced at going through site plans than we are,
Yeah.
the site plan reviews.
Anyway,
So-
that's the one that stuck out that I said, whoa, where's that getting snuck in
I'll
here?
tell you this, yeah.
So would it not come at all for any of, like if it was in a wetland setback, anything, it just automatically, once it's
So
on
it
private,
would-
once it's
it
on
would be
town
a town
property?
board approval, yeah.
Right, and, so anyway, so I fought and lost that once before, so I guess I'm like, okay,
Most places that I've worked in do that. It's not an audit.
But I just want the public to know about it if they're doing it, because that's
Can
not,
I-
that's a sore subject
I
in
have
this
to tell
town.
a story. This is one of my favorite. Years and years ago, when the initial build-out of wireless was occurring, our office represented a number of carriers, and one of the carriers we represented was Nextel. You remember Nextel?
Mhm.
And the Nextel phone had this like dual, it was a phone but like a walkie-talkie, like literally like, like a police radio. And I was representing Nextel in a town in Orange County, and it was exactly that situation. They had, we were in the town hall, and there was a DPW yard right behind the town hall, and that's where they were gonna build a monopole. So we were before the planning board, and the RF, you know, the radio frequency engineer comes in with his maps of where the coverage is and everything. We're in like an area, we're right near I-84. We have a big gap here, there's no coverage. And suddenly, his wife is like, Tim, I need to.
Blew that story.
That's where the big gap was.
There's a big gap, and he was kind of a big guy, he turned beet red, and he finally kind of like said, well, you know, gaps are kind of like, you know.
Coming up.
Transient, yeah, right.
Yeah.
The mountains kind of move.
But it was just like, yeah, and she was like telling him what to bring home for dinner or something. It was
Right.
unbelievable. But yeah,
That's pretty funny.
But there is basically a recognition that municipalities, certainly, school districts also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
school districts
Yeah.
will not do any zoning,
Right.
ever.
That's why they're permitted in any place in Sweden,
And,
right?
yeah, well,
You know, they go to SCD for all of their building and, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
They go to where?
educational market.
Oh.
yeah, whatever, yeah,
Yeah.
they go to education.
Yeah, I mean, they've never come anywhere near
Oh,
us.
they never will.
So, okay,
That was the big one for me.
okay, so I think that's sort of the beginning. I'm sure as we go through things, and maybe we will ask Jan, and we'll get a chance to talk to Valerie about some of,
I'll begin to draft something for the board review, and maybe we get this to the town board sooner rather than later on the wetland code, because I think that's something we don't communicate.
yeah, it's a pretty significant, yes.
Something that I'm curious about, what are they using, and I probably should have read this, definition of multifamily?
It was anything that's not blood relative
family
over
and-
four people over blood relative or marriage or something like that. It was blood or marriage
Wait,
or
wait,
adopted.
No.
You're talking about now family definition.
Well, that's the family, so anything over that would be considered multifamily, is what, although you're right,
No,
that's
no,
only
no,
what
that's-
could be in single
No,
family.
You're talking about
what is the
multifamily.
definition of a multifamily dwelling?
Oh, okay, no, I'm sorry, I'm thinking
Because
of what is a family, single family.
It gets
Or
very
loud.
tricky when you're trying to reconcile what the state does per the building code and what local wants to do.
Right.
If you look at what an accessory apartment is, and we were always like, you're really having a two-family house. And if you don't, then you have two separate structures, which is two families. But the state doesn't recognize multifamily until you get to three.
Exactly.
So that's why I wanted to see what they were going to have for a definition about that.
So, because I was
Yeah,
surprised, like the
well,
Meadows,
Yeah,
which only,
Dwelling multifamily, a dwelling containing 3 or more dwelling units. That's multifamily.
3 or more.
And three?
No, 3 or more.
3 or more.
3 or more,
Right.
yeah.
So
One
columns.
family,
That's-
one.
that's-
So,
But
so if you
two
go
is
into,
kind of left in,
And there is a 2-family definition as well,
and which is,
containing 2 dwelling units.
so if you go to
Okay,
the
so-
Meadows, for example,
Mhm.
that has a lot of units that are 2 by 2.
Mhm.
It's not considered multifamily, that whole development, because it's all,
Condo.
Condos,
well, it's 2 by 2.
yeah.
So the buildings are not, so I think the only real multifamily we have in town is Wilder Boulder and the place up in Golden's Bridge that's, escapes my name, my memory. It's
Wild Oaks?
Wild Oaks, yeah. Parts of Wild Oaks are multifamily. But because that I learned during the inventory when I kept saying, no, this is multifamily, it's the whole Meadows complex, that's multifamily. And no, it's really,
Single
That's
family,
condo. No.
single family condos,
it's
You know, like detached.
They're
urban
attached.
Yeah.
attached 2-family houses, condos.
oh,
I mean, it doesn't, I don't think whether it's a condo, I don't think the ownership arrangement
Do you think it's,
determines whether or not it's multifamily.
I thought it did.
I could be wrong.
Because another tricky area, you got into what was always a positive point for me when I was working about the accessory apartment law. The owner had to live in one or the other.
right,
And that was,
And that, I think, is still
it's still there.
there.
That was the part where I was saying about the blood relative, that's part of the accessory,
Yeah,
Yeah.
where you start to separate
Right.
that structure.
So, and, you know, that gets into, so I don't know if we said this at the beginning, at least, so Judd just indicated that the solar and battery might be taken out. I think, and those are sort of commercial size big things, not what you might put on your house. But the other things that were deferred is the sewer or septic pump out law, that, and short-term rentals. And I think both of them are difficult subjects. I mean, they're both things that, so I certainly understand and don't feel like there's any, I would rather see the comprehensive plan get done, the zoning things that are relatively easy and related to the comp plan get done. But then after that, I think
Well, there's going to be,
we need to-
more to add.
we need to.
and the state may solve the problem for us for the short-term rental, because they're looking at it.
We'll see. Yeah, I don't know that they've been able to get anything. I mean, I don't know how successful they will be at getting things through, because it seems like something that works for New York City and also works for the Catskills, you know,
Yeah.
could be a difficult piece.
what was it that you were saying, though, the state is maybe going to solve something? What are they?
Well, they're looking at the short-term rentals. I don't know if
Oh,
they,
yeah,
you know,
right.
if they solve it and make it worse.
I had one other question on the wetlands,
Yeah,
and this is a feeling of the board, of how you feel about, now since we're looking at changes, 100-foot wetland buffer versus 150-foot wetland buffer, being state versus what the town is. Just curious of feeling on them.
right. So my personal view is
200.
yeah, 150 is good. I would not support seeing it reduced, and, I mean, maybe like John a little bit. I mean, there are certainly around vernal pools, so around vernal pools, there's a lot of critters that need 375 feet around a vernal pool in order of upland habitat to kind of breed and succeed. Now, not every vernal pool is ever going to get that, but I'm really hesitant at going less than 150. I mean, so my view, I think, and again, listening to a lot of the discussions at some of the public hearings, I think people wanted to keep wetlands. There's so much worry about drinking water, which came up. I mean, that's one of the reasons people are worried about septics and about lakes and about everything is protecting the wetlands. I think it would be tough to, I don't think the public want to go below 150, and I know I don't. So,
There's been a
Neither.
lot of discussion over a lot of years with that.
Yeah.
It was at 100 for a while,
Yeah,
at one point. Then it got
I tend to echo the being in concert with the state. So the
You like-
state's 100. If there is, I would like to read something that points out what that extra 50 feet means. That it can show something that I can, feel or touch or, read, as opposed to, because I asked this of the wetlands inspector that I work with, which, by the way, is another way, if you'd like to promote a good relationship, I always accompanied the wetland inspector on whenever he went out on something matter in the town, because it was an excellent opportunity to have a dialogue and have my eyes be, more up to speed with. I didn't ever pretend to be what he is, but
Right.
because the two of us, people needed the two of us in order to get approval.
Right.
Right.
Because, once again, he was the consultant, but he was not the wetland inspector. That title was rested with the building inspector. But coming back to the 150 feet, at the time that it went into effect, I was asking, because we lived here, but I worked in an area where it was 100 feet. And he said, I can't tell you, if something has come up in the meantime, I would like to read it.
What's the difference between 75 and 100 then? But
What?
if you lowered it to 75, what would be the
No,
effect?
it would lower it to 100, be consistent with
No,
the
no,
state.
no, I understand, but you're saying the 50 feet, you don't know what it does. What would 25 feet less from the state standard do? I mean, how do they come up with 100 feet?
I don't know, but that goes back to when the wetlands ordinances were developed in the mid-'80s.
Yeah, and that's my point. It was done then, and there may be a reason for it, in fact, climate change and everything else. I would think that 150 would be more appropriate. I would like to see what the rationale was for 100. I mean, you're asking what's the rationale for 150. I'm asking what's the rationale for 100.
Well, let's consider what it was before that. It was 0.
Right.
And they were filling in wetlands.
Right. No, I agree with you.
So
It's-
they
it's
came up with something, okay?
But it's something, and we're just asking for a
Okay.
little more.
All right,
That
I
would-
might have some scientific stuff I could go look
Okay.
for that talks about, but I know, I mean, so when I know that there are people that are really pushing for a lot more because of the habitat question, but I think if you're really talking about protection, oh, here's one, I'm just gonna say it. So it turns out that septic systems work in part for human health by kind of attenuation through the ground. But for a lot of water body health, it works by binding phosphorus to the soils once they leave the phosphorus that's in, people, that binds to the soil, right? So, but it binds and it uses up all the sites on the soil, and then it'll go to the next patch of soil and the next patch of soil. So they have shown that phosphorus will travel about, on relatively flat ground, it'll travel about 3 meters, a meter a year. No, 3 meters a year. A meter a year. Sorry, I'm getting confused. A meter a year. So that, and if you say a septic system will last about 50 years, that will take it like 150, it'll take it 50 meters or 150 feet. So one of the things they were saying is septic systems ought to be at least 150 feet from anything like a wetland. Because of this. Now, if you have a slope, it might go faster, but that's sort of typical travel, binding and travel plumes down, of a.
No, I'd like to see it. Seriously.
So-
If you can send it to me.
I have that somewhere, so.
Okay.
So, that's one of the things that, why do you keep septic systems, out of the buffer and try to keep it away is because, and of course, I'm sitting in a house that was built with the septic system built in 1965. It's a little more than 50 years, And so the fact that it was about 150 feet from the buffer, from a wetland, but, so that's just one example. I know a lot of the discussion is all about habitat and about other stuff, but that's one of the, learning a little too much about septics.
It's a little, we can get very theoretical here, but that's also a little cause of effect, so you're saying 50 years, but when you replace a septic system, you're not replacing all the soil 150 feet, so that phosphorus is there, so once you reinstall a septic system, you're starting already 150 feet out.
I know, but
So it's-
it's a reason not to make it any less, right? I mean, and,
There could be tiered uses within those zones too.
right, I mean, you could, and
I'm
that's.
just curious, because the state is obviously one of our guiding factors, so that's where,
Yeah, and that's where things like, okay, you can't do this within, so there's a lot of, if you look at our wetland code, there's a lot that's sort of administrative if it's within
Right.
100 feet, or 50, the swimming pool 50 feet, I mean, so that does kind of exist. So it's not, we say 150-foot buffer, but it's not hard and fast.
Right,
And
we do make
you know,
exceptions to
even
the
if.
variance.
no, but that's good, that's fair.
Yeah.
I want to get a feeling on it.
No, there's, yeah. I would, and so, at one point I went around and tried to look at what a lot of neighboring towns all did, and a lot of them have less than 150, but some of them are moving towards 150. So they are, the tendency seems to be to try to protect as opposed to go less. I don't know. Okay, I think this has been a good discussion and a good start, and we brought up some of the tougher elements, but I know we're going to have more time to do this, but I think as Judd said, maybe in the future we can just take, as something
Why
comes
don't
up,
we take
15 minutes
Yeah, why
of,
don't we take segments and
Yeah, take
go.
statements, yeah.
and do it as part of a regular meeting, but, so, if there's nothing else,
No.
I'd look for a motion to adjourn. So
Did you wanna-
moved by Charlene,
Is there any
second.
questions, or?
Oh,
Are you here for the public hearing, or?
Is there public comment?
Yeah, sure.
well, we don't, no,
No?
we don't have
It's
a
not a
public,
public hearing.
it's not a public hearing.
I thought it was.
Meeting.
No, no.
Public meeting.
All our meetings are public. However,
Not-
inside our
yeah.
meetings, we do occasionally have
Right.
public hearings.
Okay, well,
So, but we will, but I guess I would say I'm impressed that someone wanted to listen to this. But, so if you have any comments, we will always look at them. If you send it to planning at, it's not lewisboro.gov.com, it's planning at.
LewisboroNY.gov.
And Kirsten will circulate it to all of us, and we'll read it, and so we'll take your thoughts to heart as we do this. But yeah, it's not a public hearing.
But, so in the process, the planning board will not hold public hearings. All the public hearings will be at the town
The
board.
town board level,
Is that
yes.
correct?
Right. On the,
Because ultimately, the town board, all of this is their call. We're just here to recommend and advise.
but kudos for coming. I mean, this
Yes.
is really, and there might be an opening on the CAC if you want to get involved in this. No, so, okay, so we have a motion to adjourn, and do we have a second?
Second, I think.
I'll second it.
John, okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, at 8:21. Thank you all for coming out on such a night.